Do not question authority.
This is the currency of the resistance. What is Bitcoin?
What is Bitcoin? To me, Bitcoin is censorship-resistant value transfer without any need for a middleman that has this unique quality of being unconfiscatable. And people have not yet realized the power of this unconfiscatable property because it's the first time we've ever owned anything of value as a human being that is unconfiscatable.
So on our journey from the Genesis block to the moon, 2013 is quite a crucial year. Central banks, governments around the world really begin to take notice of Bitcoin because in 2013 it demonstrates that it is unconfiscatable. And in March 25th, 2013, we saw the Cyprus bail-in. The Cyprus banking system had collapsed. And what did European central bankers and IMF sorts around the world decide to do? That they would have a bail-in, i.e. if your cash, your money was deposited in the bank, they would take anything above $100,000 and bail in the bank and bail in the creditors.
Yes, exactly. Cyprus, well known in the annals of Bitcoin history because it gave people that were in technology for a long time and just got into finance and banking through Bitcoin a real front seat look at the skullduggery of the banking system. They're like, what? They can just take your money right out of the bank, say, what? So they're like, well, you know what? Actually, Bitcoin, it's unconfiscatable. You know, that seems to be a major attribute of this thing. Like, you know, we could do battle with these banks because you can't get to our private keys. So this light bulb went off in the Bitcoin community that they had it one up on the bankers.
Bitcoin seemed so important with the events of Cyprus in 2013 when the government of Cyprus and the European Union just confiscated money out of people's bank accounts. And then again in Greece in 2015 when the banks were just shut down and people were only allowed to withdraw 20 euros a day from ATM machines. So why Bitcoin is so that you are in control of your own money and no government can take it from you or tell you how much you can withdraw from a machine on the street.
The people in Cyprus didn't realize they need Bitcoin until their savings were bailed in. The people in India didn't know they needed Bitcoin until they had to stand outside with bags of cash in a queue trying to put all that money into a digital format because the government was making their savings illegal. The people in Mexico didn't know that they needed Bitcoin until Donald Trump became president, and that had an effect on the value of their Mexican peso. The people in England didn't know that they needed Bitcoin until Brexit happens. They lose 25% of the value of the currency and they realize that there's this apolitical currency. And while most people didn't make that discovery, more and more people at each event do make that discovery.
It's funny, like when I was a kid in Brazil, the government came and did a haircut on everybody's savings. Due to their mistakes, instead of, debasing, like doing something else, they came and they took what was not theirs. And this is like, it's beyond even taxes, right? I mean, you can't just come and steal people's monies. And what's fascinating with Bitcoin is like, it's the Mullen Laban of money. It's like, come and take it, right? You can't, aside from force, right? You really can't take the money from people.
What we've seen it become through the years is this digital gold, this ability to store value without the ability for any government or any bank to be able to take that value away, whether that means, whether that means inflating it away or stealing it from you outright through taxes and things like that. This is the opportunity for people to be able to save value for their children and their children's children without having to worry about it being confiscated. So the world's first unconfiscatable asset is what Bitcoin is to me.
March 25th, 2013 is when the Cyprus bail-in happened. March 28th is when Bitcoin passed the $1 billion market cap. April 2013, just a few weeks later, it hit $100 for the first time. Many people in Cyprus, we on Keiser Report were covering it, they realized the use case for Bitcoin, why unconfiscatable money was so important, why permissionless money was so important, because it was the masters of the fiat financial system who determined who had permission to keep their savings from Cyprus and those who had the permission to be handed the savings. So we did see a few people, for example, get arrested at the airport trying to leave with bars of gold, trying to leave Cyprus with their wealth. But if you bought Bitcoin, you could just get on a flight with nothing in your pocket but your passport and then show up in London or New York or Venezuela, anywhere you wanted to go with your Bitcoin and your wealth.
Right? You can't just take an airplane with a bar of gold. And and it's just one bar of gold because gold price is not really doing what it's supposed to do anymore because of paper gold. But with Bitcoin, you can put $1 billion, $2 billion, $10 billion in 12 words. You just have to remember those 12 words. You can be searched, you can be, whatever, but eventually they're gonna have to let you go.
Bitcoin is, hands down way better than every other store of value that's ever existed. It doesn't require physical transport. It's at the speed of email. It is much easier to, transport from one place to another. It's securable in multiple ways. You can back it up. There's a lot of ways in which it's superior to traditional stores of value, and it isn't inflated by a central bank. It's not centrally controlled. So in many ways, it's way better.
Right, it's transportable for sure. It's something that was noted as an attribute of gold. It's transportable, easily to transport, relatively speaking, divisible, fungible, desirable. And Bitcoin had all of those things, but in greater quantity. Certainly the transportability of Bitcoin versus gold was vastly superior.
So Cyprus proved that Bitcoin was an asset worth holding. It was a store of value worth keeping in a day and age when we were already on quantitative easing 3, QE3. They kept on having to increase and change their algorithm of rescuing the financial system. We've had more and more credit poured into the system. We've had bail-ins. Everywhere you look around you in the fiat world, it is collapsing. There are all these signs of collapse. And with Cyprus, it was the first point where they said, we're actually just going to take your savings next. That's the plan the next time. We're not going to bail out the banks. We're going to bail in the banks. We're going to take your cash and rescue our friends in the banking system.
Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Councils here in the UK are calling for tougher laws to police aggressive beggars. Finally, no longer will the bankrupt beggars be shaking us down for yet more handouts and bailouts every time we pass the city. No longer listening to them plead for more money printing and free credit facilities. We're sick and tired of all the bankrupt beggars harassing us every time we pass one of their toll booth cons. Like this famous one. Hey, I'm Jamie Dimon. Oh, look what I found. It's your banking system that I found trashed on the ground. Before me, give me $1 trillion and I'll give it back. Give me $1 trillion. I want another trillion. More trillions. Give me, give me, give me. Oh my God, he's taking the kiddie's piggy bank, our paychecks, your granny's pension. Give it to Jamie, give it to Jamie. Your rail system, your healthcare, education system. Give it to Jamie, give it to Jamie. He wants it all. Give me, give me, give me. Your postal system, transport system. Yeah, give it to Jamie. Take it, everything, you freaking loser. This was a wake-up call to a technology crowd that was really never exposed to the banking industry as such. And they had invented something called Bitcoin, and now they were comparing it to the use case of the modern banking system. It allowed for quantitative easing. It allowed for bail-ins. It allowed for moral hazard, which was the cute little name they gave themselves for when they broke the law. Like, well, it's moral hazard. We're allowed that, right? And the technologists are like, we deal in zeros and ones. It's very binary. You're either in, you're out. It's false or true. And you don't have moral hazard in software industry. Imagine if you try to land a man on the moon and the software only had to be somewhat accurate. No, that doesn't work. So now the technologists are thinking, you know, our money is actually better than their money. It's unconfiscatable, it's immutable, it's distributed, they can't get at it, we're getting wealthier, price is going up. I think this is a revolution. The Bitcoin barbarians are at the gate, nipping at the feet of the command and control dollar reservists, taunting the bread and circus pushing political clown tyrants, mocking the corrupt regulators and party officials who hate any payment system, which they can't chop up like a line of coke, like a credit card, and despise any currency through which they can't snort that line of coke. Yes, the Bitcoin barbarians are here, and the barbarous relic-loving hordes are letting them through the gates because all agree that Caesar, or whoever is Obama, is a freaking schmuck.
Every time a disaster like this starts to unfold, attention is given to Bitcoin. And now we start to really see the price go up, the distribution go up, more people understand and know about Bitcoin. Certainly in Cyprus, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the housewife, the policeman, the fire officer, the fireman, the doctors, the lawyers, everybody in Cyprus now knows about Bitcoin. May 2nd, 2013 is the first time we see a Bitcoin ATM. So you can go to one of these cash points, deposit some fiat currency, and get some Bitcoin sent to your Bitcoin address.
Right, and the critics of Bitcoin would see that as a point of derision. Like, oh, they think they have ATMs now, and not knowing that this is a brilliant use of Bitcoin. Or they'd say, why does the symbol always look like it's an ounce of gold? Don't they know it's not gold? Right, and of course it is gold, you see. The revolution's right in your face. It's happening before your eyes. It's just your own inability to see the protocol for what it is makes you blind. It's epic. It's a Greek tragedy. The people who are going to get wiped off the face of the earth, the banksters, are blind to what is right in front of their face.
Then Wall Street really starts to take notice. New York, bankers, that sort of people are really starting to notice it on the edge. July 2013, the Winklevoss Bitcoin Trust, they file for that. They don't actually, they're not granted a regulator permission for that, but the Winklevoss, they've received their hundreds of millions of dollars of payout from Facebook, and they pour a lot of it into Bitcoin. They are still one of the largest holders of Bitcoin, and they got involved in Bitcoin in July 2013.
Right, the Winklevoss twins, I believe, the press at least dubbed them the first Bitcoin billionaires. And they took that money from Facebook and they went all in on Bitcoin, and they were rewarded handsomely. Whenever you yell billionaire in a city full of bankers like New York City, you know, the shockwaves are felt instantaneously, and suddenly everyone is looking there and wondering, how do we become a Bitcoin billionaire? So it attracts a whole new group of opportunistic, carpet-bagging, derivatives-wielding banksters who have to come to terms with the protocol and deal with it on its terms, not their terms.
August 9th, 2013, Bloomberg Terminal gets the Bitcoin ticker.
Yeah, Bloomberg, of course, is the go-to source for everything financial in any country or city of any importance. The Bloomberg terminal is where most deals happen. All price discovery, all price tracking is done on a Bloomberg terminal. To make it into Bloomberg and to have the representation on the terminal is a signal to bankers that they can now direct that multi-trillion-dollar pool of assets that they manage around the world and point it toward destination Bitcoin. What does this mean? Is it an asset class I should be exposed to? Do I need to rotate out of some stocks, some bonds, some currency, some property and own this new asset class? Of course, some do. And this is the beginning, really, of a whole new chapter. All right, so as an asset class, and I remember when we were in New York recently, we were talking about this in your office, and we were discussing how hedge funds have got to look at Bitcoin as an asset class, because if they don't, they might find themselves lagging their peers in 6 months or a year. So with the hedge funds coming into this, I want to ask you, since you've launched the Bitcoin Investment Trust, has it now become an instrument for this hedge fund community? Barry.
Not quite yet. We're seeing three big groups of investors right now. We're seeing tech entrepreneurs who are excited about Bitcoin as a technology. They can actually invest in the Bitcoin Investment Trust via their IRAs now, and so that's been exciting for that group of investors. The next group are family offices. So what's interesting is we're starting to see family offices who have a very diversified investment strategy, long-term time horizon, taking a piece of their gold allocation and putting it into Bitcoin. And then the third group, it's Wall Street professionals, portfolio managers, traders who are not yet investing for their clients or their LP money. They're investing personally. And I personally think that this is the precursor to the hedge fund money coming to the space.
All right, well, Barry, if that's so, and you've got these early adopters, very smart money coming into Bitcoin in a space which is now roughly, let's say, $6 billion in size, and the Winklevoss twins, who you also have a relationship with in terms of the local Bitcoin and Silicon Alley community, they're calling for this to possibly achieve market capitalization of $400 billion, which would make it on par with the largest of the stocks listed on the New York Stock Exchange, like an Exxon, for example. Is that kind of the, are you in the same camp? Do you think this is where we're going?
I think the outcome for Bitcoin is binary. It's a highly risky investment right now. It's either going to be total loss of your principal or a fantastic return. And actually on the website for the Bitcoin Investment Trust, it's bitcointrust.co, we actually outlined 4 different scenarios of upside for Bitcoin. If it was the size of Western Union, if it was the size of PayPal, if it was the size of the monetary base of Turkey, and then the biggest one is 5% of gold. And if you take 5% of gold, gold's about a $7 trillion asset class, we're talking about returns of certainly well in excess of anything else out there.
It was around this time that Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, was saying that if any of his employees at JP Morgan were buying Bitcoin, he would fire them. Well, I know for a fact that in London, there was an app developed for some of their traders to trade Bitcoin. It had to be written in Excel or something like that because their own monitors were being monitored. So their algorithm that traded, I was told by the programmers, they all hated Keiser report because every single time Max mentioned Bitcoin, the price would move significantly, which put their jobs in jeopardy because they had to get away from their desk, go to the algorithm and try to trade it and say, oh no, it's buying too much, it's selling too much. So it kept on triggering buy and sell orders on their algorithm, which outside of Keiser report episodes was like trading normally, or outside of your tweets was trading normally.
I think I have a unique position in the history of Bitcoin as being the only person on Twitter that could actually move Bitcoin.
Yes.
There's been a lot of folks who have come along subsequently, and they've been associated with other coins, much smaller coins. But I'm the only one that actually had the power through my Twitter stream to move the price of Bitcoin significantly.
It would be until Mark Cuban was the only person that moved it very temporarily a few years later. But back in 2013, you were moving it regularly. And now, speaking of moving Bitcoin, on November 19th, 2013, we have a historical event. Bitcoin moves more money than Western Union. November 19th, 2013.
This was anticipated by people who observed how Bitcoin operated in the wild, but the folks in that industry, the money transmission business, were in denial. I remember being on the BBC on Newsnight debating somebody in that business, saying that Bitcoin was going to disrupt your business. And there was a lot of guffawing and laughing as to how could that possibly be, and yet very shortly thereafter it did usurp in total dollar volume what was being moved on Western Union.
Obituary number 16, the SEC shows why Bitcoin is doomed. Obituary number 21, Bitcoin is still doomed. 2013 was a year that the US government really started to pay attention to Bitcoin, and every time they paid attention to Bitcoin, the price soared. In October of 2013, the FBI seized roughly 25,000 Bitcoin from Silk Road during the arrest of the alleged owner, Ross Ulbricht. Then in November 19th, 2013, the Bitcoin price soared over $1,000. Bitcoin price surges to a record $1,242 after Senate hearing. So it was the Senate suddenly looking about, what is this Bitcoin thing? Is this the money of terrorists? If this is the money of drug dealers and mafia and all sorts of stuff. So, but them paying attention to it meant that it had mass mainstream coverage from CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, Bloomberg. Everybody was covering it and looking at what is Bitcoin. The price absolutely soared. It hit $12.42.
It's kind of like in Star Wars 1. Remember they had a perfect vector down that corridor and hit the target perfectly, and the Death Star exploded. That's like the Senate hearings, you know. That was like, it was on a collision course with the Senate in that hearing, and it all happened, and you could just tell when that testimony was delivered that this was now the beginning of the destruction of the Death Star. All the banksters and regulators, all that corruption, all those bail-ins, all that fiat money. This was now the end, the beginning of the end.
It was the end of the beginning in terms of the fact that Bitcoin, the white paper, happened at the same time as quantitative easing. QE1 and Bitcoin were birthed at the same time. The Senate, the Treasury, the Fed, all of these central bankers had been trying all sorts of machinations, all sorts of changes to their algorithms, hard fork, soft fork, of their own fiat system to try to rescue the system. And here in November 19, 2013, they suddenly recognize, what is this thing called Bitcoin?
It's beautiful. Death Star, beginning of the end, shattered to a billion pieces.
Obituary number 24, a prediction. Bitcoin is doomed to fail. The U.S. Senate, looking at Bitcoin, caused the price to soar. Then the price did tumble in December when the Chinese central bank banned Bitcoin. This was one of the many headlines that will then happen over the next few years of China allegedly banning Bitcoin again. December 17th, 2013, China's central bank bans Bitcoin transactions. The price fell to about $500, so down 50%, over 50% from the U.S. Senate high.
Right. Well, this is fascinating because now Bitcoin's entered the sovereign level. Okay, so the game theory, which played out amongst a few technology folks when it was sub $10, and then the game theory that played out when you had a few bankers and corporate guys entering the space and going to conferences when it was trading at a few $100s. And then when it gets up to $1,000, now you've got the sovereigns battling it out. Now China suddenly has a factor in the Bitcoin story. And then you look at what the Chinese political system is, how their economy works, how the People's Bank of China, how that influences global economic policy, and were they involved in all these bailouts, and how is Bitcoin going to impact that economy? And these are questions that people are asking, and questions that the People's Bank of China needs to ask themselves. And so on one hand, it's disappointing that that announcement crashed the price, but on the other hand, it's exhilarating because it shows now that we're going to see how the game theory is played out on a sovereign level. The next level of this massive video game, multiplayer video game, where every time you move up a layer, you get a huge prize called a higher price. And it just sucks in more players because they're winning at this game. Everyone's being bumped up to the higher level. Everyone in is winning effectively. If you got in at $5, I mean, you're massively winning this massive video game, and now you're battling the Chinese, People's Republic, and that's an awesome place to be in this video game, and you've got momentum on your side. So why not take on the People's Bank of China? Why not take on China? Why not take on any sovereign? Why not take them all on? We're going to win this thing.
Even if China totally beefed up the Great Firewall and cut off all Bitcoin traffic between China and the rest of the world, what would that mean? Well, it would mean that there would actually be two Bitcoins. There would be Bitcoin inside of China and Bitcoin everywhere else. And the same thing applies, if any other country were to wall themselves off. I don't think that shutting down the internet is feasible because there would be so much economic loss as a result. It's not something that I think at least in any first world country, would be feasible. But even if there was some sort of partitioning at the internet level between countries, that just means there's going to be multiple forks of Bitcoin until someone bridges those gaps. And it only takes one bridge connection, and it doesn't have to be over the internet. You could bridge it over radio or satellite. I mean, it is so hard to stop information from flowing these days that it would only be a matter of time before someone managed to poke a hole through whatever internet firewall was put up by governments. So I think that those type of attacks would be, temporary at best.
We beat all the early adopters. They couldn't stop it. All those early short sellers, they couldn't stop it. All the miners who tried to, create monopoly positions, they failed. Nobody can stop it. Now it's taking on governments. We like that.